Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be showing you how I fill in my brows 3 ways. I have thin, dark, and sparse brows from years of over plucking. So if you'd like to see how I do this, just keep on watching. Okay, so these pencils are the Wet n Wild Brow Pencil. This one right here is the LA Colors Browie Wowie Pencil. This one right here is the City Colors Brow Pencil. This one right here is the Winky Luxe Universal Brow Pencil. And this right here is the It Cosmetics Brow Power Pencil in the shade Universal Taupe, and that is what I'm going to be doing. First off, I'm going to be showing you how I fill in a more natural brow that I prefer. And first here, I just underline the bottom part of my brow to kind of define the shape that I want to go for. All of the pencils I showed you before are all my main go-tos, and they're all either some shade of dark brown or an espresso color. And then right here, I'm just starting to feather in any sparse areas by just lightly flicking the pencil throughout my brows. Then I like to go in with the spoolie side and really soften out that color so it doesn't look as harsh. Now for brow gels, I prefer either the e.l.f. brow gel, the clear one, and then the Brow Gal Clear Gel Mascara as well. And then what I'm going to be doing here is I'm going to be lightly setting my brows into a more raised position. Then what I like to do is I like to go in with a powder next. This is the City Colors Brow Duo in dark medium, the City Colors Brow Quad in dark, and this is the Brow Gal Convertible Brow 2, which I'm going to be using today. Now when doing this, I prefer to use the Brow Gal Angled Brow Pencil as well. And what I like to start out with is I define that lower edge once again with powder to just give it a little more depth and darkness. And then I like to go in with feather-like hair strokes just to give it more of an appearance of having a fuller brow. And then since the sparsest area of my brows are at the front, I like to create just little brow hairs there as well. And then I go in with a spoolie once more to just soften up that color once again. And then I'm going back in with that powder and I'm creating hair-like strokes coming from the top of my brow going downward. And then here is a very up-close, awkward side-by-side comparison of how it looks filled in naturally for me compared to how it looks without any product in it. And that completes the first eyebrow look. And now I'm going into the Profusion Brow Powder Palette, and I'm taking the shade Chocolate on the same brush. This is the second way I fill in my brows, and I prefer to do it solely with powder instead of powder and pencil combination. And you could see here that I am defining the lower half of my brow just as I did beforehand. But with this brow powder, it is much darker, and I don't really go in with a spoolie to soften out the color. And then when I do the top of my brow, I probably go about, I want to say, a centimeter in and really have a defined line going from there into the tail. And then I start filling in the tail of my brow first, where I deposit most of the color, and then I lightly start to bring it inward. Now right here, when I have less product on my brush after I fill in this part, I like to create a defined line, but a very, very light line that meets up with the line on the bottom from the top, just so that it gives a nice gradient. And then right here, I'm showing you that at the front, it is softer than the tail end of my brow, probably about the last 2/3 of my brow, actually. And the reason for that is right here, I'm going in and packing on as much product onto that brush and creating hair-like strokes so that it still gives the appearance of hairs, but then it still has the lighter wash of color behind it. Here's another very uncomfortable close-up of a side-by-side comparison of no product versus how I fill it in with strictly powder. Then I'm going to be filling in my brows the third way with pomade. This right here is the BH Studio Pro pomade. This right here is the NYX Tame and Frame pomade. And the one I'm going to be using today is the e.l.f. Lock-On Liner and Brow Cream in the shade Espresso, but these are my 3 main ones I go for. This right here is an Essence eyeliner brush, I believe, and this is what I prefer to fill them in with. And then, of course, I'm just going in and defining that lower edge of my brow before I do anything else. And if you could see on my other brow, I actually filled it in with powder, so I could give you a side-by-side comparison of how it looks with powder versus pomade later on. Now I'm going to be doing that same step I did with the powder, where I go in about 1 centimeter of the way and then start to define the upper half of my brow. Now I think when it comes to powder versus pomade, a powder for me is pretty fast. With a pomade, I try to be more precise so it looks very nice and crisp. But if I had to choose one or the other, I think pomade is probably my go-to, but I've actually been using powder more recently just because I've been kind of lazy at it. And then I'm just going to be starting to fill in the brow, starting from the tail and then working my way inward. And then when I have less product on my brush, I'm going to create that definition in the inner part of my brow at the top, so that it's not as harsh or as dark as the other parts of my brow. Then I am also lightly dragging any color I have left on the brush to fill in that space so that it creates a nice darker background. Here is a close-up to give you an idea of the gradient that is happening. And then I'm going to be going in with the Bodyography Pro Angled brush. This is the brush that I prefer to use for the front of my brows when I'm using pomade. And I really coat the tip of it so that it's nice and sharp. And then I go in and I start creating those brow-like strokes. Now for me, with a pomade, I find it easier to create a thin line compared to how thick my lines are compared when using a powder. And then I just start filling in all that sparse area So that kind of gives the illusion of hairs that I don't have there from just sad, sad years of overplucking, and they just never grew back in the way that I wanted them to. They just like refused to grow back in. Now there's also a sparse area right here underneath my brow where you can tell where it's a little lighter than the rest of it. So I go in and I create hair-like strokes with the pomade as well, just to give it a little more depth and make it look more uniform. And then here is an up-close and personal side-by-side comparison of the pomade versus the powder. You can see they're pretty similar, but they're not like super similar. You could see the different finish, the different color, etc., etc. But I'm thinking of doing more how-to videos in the future, so let me know if that's something you're interested in the comments below. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you aren't already, and I'll see you in my next one.